Hi guys, Chris Dorry here. Today I'm going to take you through, as a big thank you for getting me to 500 subscribers, some of this year's draft reaches. So to start us off with, the natural disclaimer is these guys aren't necessarily duds. They're just guys where I feel the risk is too high to take them where they were taken. So if I was to look through these names, the only two that I would personally be looking at as considerations in the national draft would be Nick Cox and Zach Reid. The only thing here is, though, with a Nick Cox, well, I had him at 20 on my draft board as someone who I'd be willing to pick either sort of there or beyond. And Zach Reid, he was someone I rated in the 20s. So what you'll see with all these players, and none of this is about having a go at teams, this is just my personal methodology. So with all these players, the thing that we see, and I haven't listed it here, but they're all Victorians. So that's the first thing to note. So we haven't really seen them this year. And the vast majority of these guys, we've got key position players. So we've got key position player, key position player, key position, key position, key position, key position, and the last two key position players as well. So most of these are key position players. And the things I'm noticing, as I've got here, well, we've got these sort of athletic types, but they're players where I don't feel like they've got enough to necessarily support their cases at the positions they were taken, where you've got these high-level athletes who don't necessarily have the performances on the board, and they're really players across the board really, but particularly with the key positioners, where I'd be feeling like I'd really need to see how they developed this year to feel confident in drafting them. And that's why I had the likes of a Nick Cox or a Zach Reid lower than others did on their draft boards, where I'm not going to say they're duds, they're players where, look, they could be great key position players or whatever position they respectively end up settling in. But they're types where I also think that their floor is quite low, where they might not turn out to be anything significant. And that's the thing that I've found, having covered the draft for the last 12 years, is when you're looking a year out from the draft, so many of the key position players you might like that year out, well, when you go into their draft years, well, they can just completely drop off draft boards. So that's something that you really need to be aware of. And that's something that I've been hyper aware of in making my draft board. And to take that risk into consideration, well, I've got the likes of a Cox and Reid a lot lower than certainly AFL clubs would, who are basically backing them based on not only their athletic ability, but it could be, in the case of these two, skill level, and in the cases of others, well, it might be some sort of mix of attributes where they think maybe I could mold that. But with all these guys, for me, it's just really taking a bet. So with a Nick Cox, what am I seeing? So you can play him key forward, key back. Given he's got the athletic profile, good skills, if he doesn't work out at either end, well, you've still got the options of having him as either a tall flanker or a wing as well. So he's someone where I think he can make the grade, but there are risk factors. So, and with his production more good rather than great, well, he's someone where he's got an early year birthday. So when you're born earlier in the year, well, typically you're not necessarily expecting as much development from this point versus someone with, say, a November or December birthday. And then another factor to look at as well, I personally take a strong look at, well, what percentage do they win contested? And if we're to look at these guys, well, Cox wins or finds more of it than others, I should say. But in terms of how much he gets of it contested, well, low 30s. So for me, that's a bit of a worry. And it's something where it just leaves me with a tiny bit of doubt, because it's those that win a high percentage contested at AFL level that really tend to become really good players. So with a Nick Cox, I'm not necessarily as convinced as others that he has the ceiling that a lot of people are suggesting. He could be an excellent player, but I'm just not yet sure. So that's something to watch. And then it's the same with Zach Reid, where skill's fantastic, he can read it behind the play, but again, he's someone with an early year birthday. And if we're to look at his production, well, good, reasonable to good numbers for, I guess, that sort of underage year, and same story with Cox, but not on a great level where I'm not inspired with absolute confidence. So that's what I'm looking at there. And then with the rest of the guys, well, I'm not necessarily seeing them as guys where I'd take in the national draft, where, look, a Connor Stone, he's someone I'd consider if he was there as a rookie, because he has shown that he can hit the scoreboard. He does have some tricks around goal. Perhaps he could be sort of a running defender, but I would really struggle taking him top 10, where he's a sub 10 disposals per game guy. Yeah, he's hit the scoreboard, but a lot of that's based off his first game where he kicked the 5 goals. And he did that on a dominant Oakley squad where he had the likes in the midfield of a Rowell, Anderson, Phillips. Well, you've got picks 2 and 3 last year, a pick 3 from this year. And then you've got others, like you've got the likes of Reef, you've got the likes of McRae, among many others. You had Bianco on that same squad who was a really good kick. So it was just an absolute star-studded squad like I've never seen from a NAB League or sort of TAC Cup team before that. So just having that sort of delivery, I'd be hoping for more production than that. And he's someone where even from an attribute perspective, well, I worry a bit about his agility, worry a bit about his turning circle. I'm just not sure, and I would absolutely not consider him in the first round. That's a selection that really I struggle with. And it's a bit the same with a Ryan Angwin, where he's someone where, look, to his credit this year, well, he's developed a lot physically and he's put in the work, and I think that plays a large part in where he is on this board. But he's someone where I feel like it's just hard to pick him, where he doesn't have the performances. Getting as a mid for the most part, well, 11.5 disposals, not much in the way of marks, tackles. He's just someone who really struggles to find the ball. He's got elite endurance, so you've got that. But if you've got elite endurance and you're not finding much of the ball, well, for me, I don't really look at that as a positive. I look at that as, well, gee, they've got the endurance, but they can't find it. So how are they going to start doing that all of a sudden at the next level? So again, I see that as a really risky pick. And with all these guys, look, there will be some on this list that will make the grade, but for me, it's just a case of the risk factor is higher than I'd be willing to use a selection of for one of these guys. So next up, so I've got a Max Holmes. So he's someone where phenomenal athlete, but again, this sample size just makes it, for me, a bit of a silly selection, where all he's played is just one game in the NAB League, and otherwise, well, you're just guessing how good he could be. And there was some fanfare around that, and that was all well and good, but what he did in his one game, well, he was reasonable. 15 disposals, a mark, a tackle, didn't kick any goals. But he's someone where, look, he's a project player, and if you're looking at a project who will take time to develop, we've only seen one game, so there's really an inadequate sample size against reasonable competition. Well, inside the top 20 is just too risky. There were still some guys at that stage that are, I guess, have more performances behind them. They're a bit more battle proven. So Geelong obviously feel like they're in a position to take that sort of chance, and good on them. But paying up that future first for a Max Holmes, the risk for me is too great. And he's someone where he'll put in the work, great athlete. Maybe he's got a shot with some time, but yeah, for me it's just a no. Just too risky. So Matt Allison, so now we're into some of the key forwards. So with Allison, look, he's got that great aerobic capacity. He should be a decent mark, but again, 1.5 marks per game, 8.2 disposals, less than a goal a game, but he has played up the field, which is way less goals. But early year birthday, so when you've got sort of a key position-ish, maybe as a flanker, maybe as a tall wing, we'll see what he becomes at the next level. But for me, it's just a case of, well, the work that he's put in, well, it hasn't been great. And when you've got an early year birthday, well, I'm not sure how much is necessarily developed over that time. So again, for me, not enough evidence, and that's a really high pick for someone where, look, you don't necessarily have that play behind you. So again, it's a bit of a worry. So then we've got a Seamus Mitchell. So he's someone where perhaps some might say I'm being a touch harsh, and he's probably one of the better performed in fairness to him on this list. But again, for me, and with a lot of these that aren't the key position players, we're really looking at the freak athletes that we're wanting to make into footballers. And for me, you really need to have shown that you can be a good footballer to really justify a selection, certainly in the first half of the draft or first 30. So for me, that sort of troubles me a bit. Yeah, he's hit the scoreboard, 1.2 goals, that's pretty good, but is he finding enough of the ball? No. He can impact games, he's got the speed, he's got a penetrating kick, so there's some tools there, but for someone with tools but not necessarily the performance or consistency, for me it's just a bit hard to justify taking him in that early. Where if I was to say, would he be good as a rookie pick? Yeah, I'd say, yeah, suitable for selection as a rookie, but not within the first 30 for me. I think there's, again, many better performed players in this draft who I would be willing to take quite a way before him, that's for sure. So next on to Collingwood, so Liam McMahon. And he's someone where maybe he's in the better half of this list, perhaps, I could argue. But again, he's someone where I just wouldn't have selected. When you've got guys like a Jackson Callow, Kane Baldwin, who go completely undrafted, well, I would have just taken one of those as a rookie, get someone, in my opinion, better at this sort of selection. So what's he been doing? Well, again, year off from footy, but you've got 8.3 disposals a game, 3.1 marks, less than a goal a game is really a key forward. If you're not kicking your sort of, I guess, 2 goals a game as a junior, if you're a key forward, it's not a great look, particularly when you're in sort of an under-18 competition. You really want to be around that mark. And look, with Liam McMahon, maybe had we seen footy this year, maybe we see that improvement, maybe he gets up to that production. But again, without necessarily seeing that, well, you're just guessing. You don't know. And that's what unsettles me with really all these picks, particularly the tools. We're just guessing as to what they may be. And you really want guys, I guess, given we haven't seen that footy, who have either played this year or have at least been good in the past. So next up, we've got Fraser Rosman. So he's someone where great athlete. Some have even speculated he could be a tall wing, could be a key forward. I'm not sure what position he'll settle in, but at this stage, he's someone where he just doesn't really look necessarily like a footballer, where great speed endurance combination. That's why Melbourne have bet on him this early. But if all you're doing is 8.5 disposals, 3.1 marks, well, he's just not really a footballer yet, not kicking any goals. The hope is he'll probably become forward. Maybe you put him back behind the ball, but he's very much a development project. You need to give him 4 years, maybe then he becomes something. But for me, it's just with pretty much all these selections, other than maybe the first 3, they're just really low floor types where they could be out of the league in 2 years. So it's quite a worry taking a Rosman that early, just without necessarily that football performance on the board. One I'm probably a little bit more optimistic on is Josh Iyer. So he's someone where I'm looking at, 6.5 disposals, 2.5 marks, 0.4 goals. He's a key forward, so look, those numbers aren't good at all, and for me that's exactly what makes him more suitable as a rookie. But he's someone where, look, October birthday, so later year birthday, has shown improvement from all reports this year, and he's someone who has had injuries in the past year. So he's someone where, look, maybe if he had a clean bill of health, a good year, I think he's someone who would have shown that rate of improvement. That would have made him, to me, a bit more draftable. But again, it is still a bit speculative, which again makes me put him on this list. So and if I was to order these guys necessarily, well, I'd say probably Anaya would be maybe a 4th or 5th best on this list. I would say could be 3rd potentially, depending on whether it's he or Stone. But but again, it's just a risk. It's not a methodology I subscribe to. I don't want to guess if someone's a good footballer. I want them to be a good footballer, have that production behind them. And that's really what I'm trying to get across with this list. You need to be a proven player in some capacity to really be someone worth spending a national draft pick on. And the next guy, many will actually say has had enough performance behind him, and fair enough for those who say that. So Harry Sharp. So we've got an elite endurance athlete, has the speed. So, that's nice. 13.9 disposals. That's actually pretty reasonable for his age in that sort of outside role. But what does concern me is this. So we've got someone who wins a very low percentage of the ball contested, which for me is a concern, because again, those that win a high percentage contested, they're the ones that tend to translate well to the next level. And then we've also got a 15.4% disposal efficiency. So as someone where really he butchers the ball a lot, and I just don't trust him by foot at all. So he's someone that in the national draft I really worry about taking. He's someone where if a club took him as a rookie, I wouldn't bat an eye. But in the national draft, it's a personal preference thing, but for me, no, just because I guess of those 2 red flags, where it doesn't win enough contested, kicking efficiency isn't high enough. But he's someone where a bit like a Holmes, Sharp is cut from that same cloth, where absolute elite endurance and athlete all round. He's someone, again, as with a Holmes, that will put in the work. So they're the arguments for. But again, just on, I guess, footballing ability, proven performance, he's someone where I do sort of struggle with that selection. And the next one, Ollie Lord. He's someone where I'd say he's probably, it's hard to make the suggestion, but possibly the worst performed on this list, and the one I'd be really most worried about, where of course he has the famous grandfather, he has that football pedigree, so maybe that's what in part at least appealed to Port Adelaide, but he's someone where the performances on the board will a lowly 5.2 disposals, 0.8 marks, 0.4 goals. This is the key forward, so that's really terrible terrible performance. So he really needs to be better than that. And if we're looking at his birth date, well, 2nd of January. So he's someone born right at the very start of the year, and yet you're banking on this sort of performance. So again, good athlete, has a leap, but gee, I would not make that selection. Not in a million years. I wouldn't pick him as a rookie. I don't think he's done nearly enough. So he's someone where I'd say, come back next year, show me something next year. So well done to him in getting drafted, but just, again, this comes back to methodology. It's not about hating on any particular players or any particular teams. It's about, well, you need some level of performance behind you, and that's where my problem comes with these guys. And then I look at a Cody Brand, where he's someone where he's mostly a key back. He had that one game where I think he kicked 3 or so goals as a key forward, so that was probably his best glimpse. But as a key back, where I think he'll most likely settle, well, he's someone where he's just exclusively a negating defender. He can kick, so that's lovely, but beyond that, well, he doesn't have any intercepting side to his game. So when that's the case for a key defender in particular, well, that's a real concern. So for me, Brand is someone I'd just let someone else pick. I would have passed on him altogether personally, but he does have his fans, so fair enough. But yeah, as with these others, again, the numbers just don't jump out at me. So basically, I guess the fundamentals that I would take out of this, if I was a recruiter or passing knowledge onto another AFL recruiter, would be basically, you don't want to be taking bets on guys who don't have the performances behind them. And I wouldn't be speculating on athletes. It's nice if someone's athletic, but unless they've actually shown they can apply that athleticism in a way on the field where it means that they're impacting games meaningfully and really, I guess, having an impact that way, well, I'm not really strongly in support. And I think these are, I guess, two things that clubs seem to, I guess, overemphasize, where clubs are taking, for the most part, key position players who haven't performed way too early. And that's something that I've been doing a lot different in my personal selections of key position players, where I really want guys who have those performances behind them and have that rate of improvement. And without those two things, well, that really concerns me. And then if I'm to look at those more athletic types, well, I think AFL clubs also put way too much emphasis on athleticism. So a lot of these key position players, well, they're very good athletes, but they're not yet good footballers. And you look at the other types, well, you've got someone like an Angwin, great athlete, Max Holmes, great athlete, Harry Sharp, great athlete. So they've got the athleticism, but I just think they're taking athleticism for the take of taking someone who they think will be quick and might develop. So I'd be taking football as well before any of these sort of guys. So that's a personal learning from, I guess, what I've taken out of drafts past, analysing, basically going through each draft in the past of, okay, well, this guy went here and they went too early. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Well, a lot of the time I've found it's a case of just taking athletic guys too quick and not taking those proven footballers where they should. And it's the same with key positioners. It's really guys where they're just guessing that based on some athleticism or some attributes, they'll come good. Well, for me, if they're athletic and have attributes, maybe it means they have the scope to play a few more positions potentially. So that might mean a Cox, well, if he doesn't work out as a key positioner, maybe you can put him on a wing, but I don't believe it means he has any more upside than anyone else. If you want upside, well, you need to be tracking the rate of improvement as really that proper indicator. And then if they've been growing, or whether it's, I guess, their height increasing, putting on weight, gaining strength, whether it's their athletic testing has increased, well, they're sort of indicators where, again, they can be little hints into upside, but it's not about getting the highest sort of test scores in any athletic testing. For me, that doesn't make a shred of difference. I don't care if guys are breaking endurance records or speed records. Unless they're really impacting games in that way on the field, well, it just doesn't interest me at all and doesn't count towards them as footballers, really. So Jamarra is an interesting case. So a lot of people might be asking, and this is why I'm going to jump into this right away, well, Jamarra is a Victorian and he went pick 1. How do you justify having him at number 1 on your draft board? And that's fair enough. So if I'm to look through, well, what I want to know again, well, he's got the performance, so that's something, but I next want to sort of look at his rate of improvement. How quick is he growing? So 2018, so 193 centimetres. And now what is he? Well, he's 195. So in 2019, 194, 79 kilos. So he was still pretty tall, hasn't really grown much in terms of height, but in terms of strength and as a footballer, he's improved rapidly. And this is where I give him a tick in terms of rate of improvement, where I can't quite give him the full marks because, again, we haven't really seen him this year. So we don't really know as a footballer, well, has he taken that jump to be, I guess, double the footballer, or how much better is he? So, but what we need to look at is, well, how sort of heavy is he now? So he's gained 11 kilos in weight from the start of last season to now. So he's really stacked on the weight, but he has lost no athleticism whatsoever. His athletic testing has remained strong, if not improved, I imagine, from all reports. I haven't seen his past testing results, but his current testing results, well, they've been excellent. So there's sort of some things I can look at. So height growth absolutely helps, and that does, in my opinion, count towards, I guess, assessing the upside. But when you've got someone who's making those, I guess, big time strength gains, and Jamarra is someone where I wouldn't have imagined he's really spent time in the gym really until this year, and he's probably had that time. He's probably been, no doubt, put on a weights program to get stronger, but he hasn't lost the athleticism. So all's looking good to me there. So what about his production? So his production's taken a big jump. So 2016 numbers, so 6 disposals, 2.3 marks, didn't kick a goal. So he didn't come from an overly good base, but then, well, this is what he did last year. So 10 disposals, so not finding much of the ball, but that's because he's being camped in the goal square pretty much. So 5.2 marks, so that's good. 1.9 contested marks, that's excellent. And then you've got 2.7 goals. So when you're doing this as that underager, well, phenomenal. And when you've jumped in a year to 2.7 goals from nothing, well, hey, that's something. Doubled his mark total, fantastic. Almost doubled his disposal total. What would he have done this year? Well, we can only speculate. Had he played the same role, maybe he'd be somewhere around the 4-goal a game mark, realistically, just because he had that incredible delivery, and he would have had the likes of a Will Phillips, a McRae, you'd have Reef McGuinness, so you'd have all these really good players giving him really good service. So he would have had a fantastic year, I believe. And maybe he could have had 3 contested marks a game, who knows. His marks might have jumped to maybe 8 or so. Would have had a few more disposals. So, he would have had a good year. And maybe he would have played a bit higher up the field at times, just to see that versatility. But, but given, I guess, you've got the rate of improvement where he's gone from this sort of production to this, well, absolute tick. From what we've seen, well, he's got that footballing improvement, and this year he's made the strength gains. So I absolutely believe there is the upside there based on that rate of improvement, and is coming from a high base of really good performance as well. So basically brings us into, well, what indicators can we look at without games to track the rate of development? So I've really been going through these. So if you've got guys who have got the height growth, they've sort of put on weight, they've gotten stronger, or if their athletic testing improves since the last time they tested, well, they're really the best indicators that we can really tap into, I suppose, in the absence of games. But again, you can't put too much weight into this. It's more, I guess, if I was to say out of, I guess, that 1 point, how much of a difference would it make? Well, you can only speculate maybe half a point how much this sort of comes into it, where without the games, you can't give that sort of full credit for upside. So naturally, I'll be very conservative with these compared to recruiters. So we'll have to see how many of these guys really make the grade and exceed their draft position. Thanks, guys, for watching to the end, and make sure you like. And if you've got any questions about any of the players drafted in this year's draft, well, leave a comment in the comment section below and I'll get back to you, because all the players in this year's draft will have either seen live or I've seen game footage of them. So I will be able to give some level of insight and some sort of opinion on every player drafted.